hello guys. So we have exited quite a few brands, and yeah, the total value of them is about 20 million. CoolGlow was one of them that we had exited, but there were quite a few that we've exited. So we'll talk about that in just a second. So in this particular thing, we'll make it as conversational as possible. If any of you guys want to send some chats or asks any questions along the way, please do so. But I'm going to try to keep it as simple and as high level as possible and give you as much tips that I can. But this is actually about exiting a business. But a lot of people don't realize that exiting a business actually starts at the beginning, not at the exit. Because when you want to exit, you want to be ready for it. And during an exit, you're looking at the past 4 years or 3 years of history. And so if that history is not properly set up, then at the time of exit, you'll lose a lot of valuation. And so let's talk about that real quick. What I'll do is I'll go through a quick introduction about myself, and then we can kind of run into it. There's quite a few slides, so I'm going to speak a little bit quicker so that we can kind of get through some of this stuff as quickly as we can. So from my perspective, I went to UT Austin. I did my business school there. I went to business school there, and then after that, I graduated, went to Deloitte, worked there for 2 years. And after that, I realized that, look, I really don't want to work at Deloitte. I wanted to start my own thing. So we put together a company called hsdesigners.com, which was making websites for other people. I said, you know what, we'll get $1,000, $1,500 a month. It'll pay for my rent. It'll pay for my car, and it'll just extra play money for me. Well, pretty soon what ended up happening was I very quickly realized that I was able to scale businesses rather than just building businesses for other people. And that's when the idea of selling selling Glowsticks came into being, because at that point, Glowsticks was, the fad, and things were working really well. So I said, hey, why not? Why not just start selling Glowsticks? And that was the first thing. From there, we went on to building a lot of companies. And we started getting into retail, websites, Amazon, the whole 9 yards. Eventually, we built up this thing called the Umbrella Fund, which is now a fund that we go around buying companies. And we've got well-established relationships with a lot of agents, a lot of buying agents that they know us. And so when we go in to bid for some of these companies, they go, oh, it's the Umbrella Fund. We've worked with them before. We've talked to them before. We know who these people are. So it really helps. And then the last thing is as part of the Amazon sellers, we built up a software to kind of work on our own companies. And that software is now called sellermobile.com. It's an analytical software which we use to understand our own businesses, but we also use it to buy and sell other companies. So with that, I'll tell you a few brands that we've worked on. You'll see there's quite a few brands here. Some brands are predominantly on e-commerce. Some of them are on e-commerce and Amazon. E-commerce, websites, and some of are on Amazon, and so on and so forth. We always go with multi-channel approach. So let's talk a few minutes about this party supply company that I talked about, right? This is one that we've done fairly well with, and I was able to exit this company. And so it was Glowsticks that we started in 2010. We built up to, by 2014, we built up to a $4 million revenue fairly quickly. And we were building it based on wholesale and retail. We were going to trade shows, and things were going really well. You set up factories, you set up the distribution channels, and everything was perfect. And then Amazon came into the market and started tearing apart our marketing. We dropped almost $2 million in revenue in 1 year because Amazon started coming in and buying, and buying AdWords space that we were using. So we said, look, we can't beat them. Let's join them. So we joined them we joined Amazon at $0 in revenue, and we initially started selling on our competitors' listings, which I know is frowned upon now, and you shouldn't do it. But that's how we started. But we quickly realized that the only way we can be successful is we build our own brand. So we built our own brand, which was practically the key factor on how we exited the company. And we exited the company in Feb of 2019. The company was doing around $20 million in revenue at that time. So that's the cool part, is we were able to scale very quickly, which then created the umbrella fund that we have. So some of the key factors behind our Amazon, exit was we target niche market, we were building brands, we were building intellectual properties, which is what helps to be able to sell later on, because that's where the value is, right? We kept our finance and accounting clean. We'll talk about that in a second. It's really, really important to understand SDE, which is seller's discretionary earnings, when you're talking about an exit, right? And what you want to do is you want to attract a bigger pool of buyers, because the more buyers there are, the more sales, more opportunity for you to sell at a higher valuation, right? And the more you have to pick from. And then if you offer, and then what you want to do is you want to set up financial incentives after the sale if possible, okay? So having said all this, let's kind of go through, what it takes to set up for an exit, right? So before you guys get into exiting a company, you want to kind of ask yourself is, why am I considering selling the business? Like, what's the point of it? What's the purpose? Is it because I'm trying to cash out? Is it because I need cash? Is it because I'm tired and I'm fed up and I just want to be out and do something else, right? Or is it because you have something else that you have on the side that's growing that you want to exit this, right? The second thing you really need to understand is, does my business have any value? Because that is extremely important to understand. And value comes from profits. Obviously, the company has to have profit. Now, there are other businesses that you can sell that may not have profit but still have value. But when it comes to the Amazon businesses, you got to have a good bottom line. You have to have a good brand, right? And also, is it the best time to sell? And we'll discuss some of these things as we go along. And what am I hoping to get from the sale, right? So you have to have your big picture done as to what's the point, what you're trying to do, how you're trying to get to it. And then once you understand your purpose, then you can lay out the rest of, the thought process behind it, okay? So in order to set up to exit, and the first part is we will talk about setting up to exit, then we'll talk about what it is that you do during an exit and what you will do after the exit, okay? So in terms of setting up for exit, it's really important to understand the salability of the business, right? What type of Amazon business you are, how long you've been in business, what is your SDE, right? So it's extremely important to understand the salability of it. Once you understand the salability of it, after that, you want to figure out the value. What's the value and how do you determine the value? Because sometimes there are instances when we go to buy a company and the seller puts a value on the company and we go, all right, well, this guy's clearly out of his mind. And what we end up doing is, instead of negotiating, we just walk away, right? Because we know that the value proposition that was set up by the seller just did not exist. It wasn't good enough. And so we kind of walk out of this deal, right? So very important to understand your valuation and be realistic in that. We will talk about top 10 things to consider when selling for success, because this allows you to increase the value of your business. And the last thing we'll talk about is the financing options that you will give to a buyer that will allow the buyer to be more interested in this particular business of yours, right? So let's start by talking a little bit about salability, okay? And Prem, if you want, just stop me at any given point in time, and so we can, I can answer any questions if needed.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Perfect. So the type of Amazon business is extremely important, okay? And there are three major types of them. There's a reseller, there's a private label, and there's a proprietary products. If you're a reseller and you're selling somebody else's brand, there's very low demand for that kind of a business. It'll be difficult for you to sell. And so if you are a reseller, I highly recommend that, if you want to sell a business, that you reconsider and try to move to the private label as best as possible. But if you have a private label, then you're looking at a lot stronger ability to sell. And your proprietary product, which means that nobody else has it in the market, like it's a flavor of yours, or it's like a vitamin or something of that nature, that nobody else has, that it's proprietary to you, that is the best type of business, and it'll sell really, really fast. Reseller, which is referred to in retail arbitrage, right? You're competing for the buy box, and your products, you buy products in bulk from the retail stores and you sell it on Amazon. That is what we call a reseller, right? So if somebody's to come to me and say, hey, I have a reseller, I have a business where I'm selling other people's products, and I go, well, what happens when that particular brand does not allow you to sell on Amazon anymore? Or what happens when 50 other competitors come in? It's basically a race to the bottom in terms of margin, and without margin and profit, it's not going to sell really well, right? So you have, again, right here, infinite number of competition, a reliable supply can be an issue, and nothing's really proprietary. Like nothing belongs to you. It's not your brand, it's not your product, it's not your packaging, it's not even your listing. So when you're buying, there's a lot of risk on the buyer side. So purchasing just becomes a little bit difficult. But if you are in the reselling business and you're thinking about starting a brand, that will be ideal, because now you're building equity into the company, right? And so setting up a private label is really cool, because exiting private label is easy, not difficult, especially if you have the right things in play. Right now, Amazon sellers are selling their businesses like hotcakes. For us to buy a business, we really have to talk to the agents. And in the last business we bought, which was about a month ago, we had 14 offers in a matter of 4 days. It was just absurd. Now because we had the power, we won it. But private label, guys, is very powerful, right? So it's value added through branding. So you've got the brand, you've got diversified portfolio of products. That's important. You can't sell one product. You have to have multiple products, because God forbid Amazon shuts down one product listing, 100% of your revenue is gone, right? So we're usually always looking for products that are, at least 20 plus, and those are also, it's not like 2 products are driving sales 100%, because if that's what's happening, again, it's a high risk business. Diversify your portfolio in a private label, right? And then you have to have a consistent supply. Make businesses more attractive to potential buyers. Consistent supply is extremely important. So have good suppliers, and we'll talk about that in a second. And the products have to have history. That's really important. You got to have it set up for reviews. You have to have, if you have some kind of a subscription model or a repeat customer base, man, that's the best way to sell. People love that. Buyers love that kind of stuff. So, keep that in the back of your mind. Again, proprietary products is the best type of products. An example is, like I said, the supplement where you've created your own formula, because it's proprietary. Nobody else has it. You have customer loyalty. You've got your own tasting in play. You've got your own, and then also super. And the items are unique to your brand, right? And that's now, those are harder to come around. Proprietary products are not easy. But if you're, let's just say, selling even like a charger, right? Build functionality in there that other people don't have. That means you can claim to say, look, this is the only type of product in the market. And if you can say something of that nature, it becomes really lucrative for purchasers. So those are the few types of businesses, right, that you want to look into. So if you're into one category, you can easily move to the branded stuff. We did it. We went from the reseller to the branded stuff. So, you guys should be able to do the same thing. Also, time in business is extremely important. The longer you are in business, the better it is, because you prove a track record, you prove history. And a lot of buyers will be more willing to pay a top dollar if there is traction in history. And when we talk about history, there should be growth in history. If the history is going downwards, then your valuation is going to take an impact. Your growth should be upwards, because that is something that you can then pitch later and say, look, 2017 numbers were this, 2018 numbers this, 2019 were this, 2020 we're about to do really well with it. And in some of these instances, like for COVID, if COVID is impacting your business, it doesn't matter as much, because it's just a international event. So all the buyers understand that these things will come back. As a matter of fact, even now through COVID times, we're acquiring businesses and we're having a hard time with just putting some of these bids in play and get the buyers to work with us. And it's COVID times, and things are working just fine. So time in business is really important. So please keep that in the back of your mind. The next extremely important concept that we need to talk about is the seller's discretionary earnings. That is huge. So what is SDE? Let's talk about that in a second. Okay. So you've got your revenue, then you've got your expenses, right? Then you've got your profit. But some of the expenses that are in your business are there are for you. Like, let's say you're paying for your health insurance, or you're paying for your car, or you're paying for like expenses that personally belong to you. Well, those things then get added back to the profit, because whoever is going to take over is going to benefit from either that expense not being there, or they're not going to have. So when you take those expenses and add that back to profit, that is how you create your SDE, your seller's discretionary earnings. Your multiplier is usually on the SDE, right? Because that's the money that's left over. So the key factor is, when we say keep accounting clean, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a little bit detail, is when you're looking at financials, that is what you want to be able to clearly identify what that SDE is going to be. To date, just to let you know, we've done research on about 110, 120 companies, right? And this has been in the last year and a half, 2 years. And so what we look at more often than not is the financials are all sorts of, they're basically garbage sometimes. And so the seller is talking about an SDE, and we're like, where did you come up with this number? Like, you can't. So those are the things that if you clean up and you understand this concept really well, you will be able to get the most bang for your buck. So I'm spending an extra minute on SDE. If you don't know about SDE, please look up more than what I've talked about, but it's extremely, extremely important, okay? Obviously, we all understand EBITDA, right? That's earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. So the bigger your company gets, it's more focused on EBITDA. But if you're looking at a company that's between, $500,000 to 5, 7, 10 million, you're mostly spending more time on seller's discretionary earnings, because that's the key. Okay. All right. So understanding business expenses, right? And we talked about this a little bit. So if you look at it, like, you've got your cost of goods, obviously that needs to be lined up and cleared out, right? So if you're not using a QuickBooks or a financial software, please do so. Invest in that, because that keeps track of your history. And don't try to do that when you're selling the company. You have to do it from the beginning, so you clean up your chart of accounts are clean, that you can clearly see cost of goods sold, so they can track back to percentages. Don't try to lump up everything together. Don't try to lump up Amazon fees and fulfillment fees and shipping services and 3PL stuff in one segment. Segregate it out as much as you can, because in the future it will help you truly understand what expenses are going where. Because sometimes a buyer's going to come in and play, and they go, look, I already got a 3PL, I don't need to worry about it. So for me, let's say if I'm coming in as a buyer and you have 3PL expenses, I will use that to my advantage and say, look, if I buy this company and they've got $30,000, $40,000, $100,000 in 3PL expenses for the year, that's instant savings for me. I may not tell the seller that, but at least I know that I'm valuing the company more because these expenses are easily displayed, right? Employees, software, and company taxes. Those things are also things that should be clearly displayed, because if I see that you're spending, you have 3 or 2 people running the show and it's costing you $50,000, well, I have an entire team in play already, right? So I'm not going to need that employee particularly. If it's very specialized, then we'll keep them on board. But if not, we have a team in play. Again, that's an extra savings for me. So the cleaner you put your your chart of accounts and your expenses, the better it is. The other cool thing that you should look into is anytime you have your personal expenses, lay them out. Because as a business owner, if you're using a particular car, or you're using some clothes or something to your business appropriately, you can expense them. If you do expense that stuff, right, then clearly put it out. I know that one of the businesses we bought had this thing where they had some kind of a lawsuit, right? And so for product infringement or whatever not, right? And so they've created a different line item on there that says, hey, this is for the lawsuit that was filed. We spent $20,000 with the lawyers. The lawsuit went away, but this $20,000 was an expense to the company. However, it's not an expense to you. So why should I subtract my seller's my profit for that $20,000? So we said, all right, that makes sense. So we removed that line. But because it was clearly displayed, we were able to say, all right, fine, we will increase the company value. Because in a given year, in the last 12 months, even if you look at $5,000 of an expense and you're taking a 4x multiplier or 3x multiplier, that multiplies by 3 times in value. So any $10,000 in expenses in the last 12 months will be $30,000, maybe more, in valuation of your company. So don't, try to keep those things clean, because all that stuff adds up. 20,000 here, 10,000 here, 5,000 here, and before you know it, you've got $30,000, $40,000 in valuation that is in increase, right? So keep that in mind. One of the strategies that we deploy, because we help with some of the other brands for friends and family, what we do is we've got this management fee strategy set up where what we'll do is we'll have some of the companies, create a management fee and pay that out to a separate company, right? So we're saying, okay, because these guys are running management for us, we're writing the fee. Management fee strategy is cool because at sometimes you can actually take the management fee and add it back to the SD to say, look, I have these management fee expenses, right? So if you want to know a little bit more about management fee, hit me up later and we can talk a little bit more about that strategy. But that's one of the things that we actually use, for that stuff. So now let's talk about value determination. Value determination, first we'll talk about is understanding the value. The second thing, we'll talk about the top 10 things you can do to increase the value. And last, we'll talk about finance options to the buyer, because the finance options to the buyer also increases the value quite a bit for your company, right? So let's look at understanding the business value, right? So there are many factors that you have to consider when you're looking at determining a selling price. But for the most part, your selling price will be your seller's discretionary earnings, multiply that by between 3 and 5x, right? Because that's how you come up with the value. So if your SDE, let's just say, is about $1 million, right? Your business will be worth around $3 million. And that's kind of the normal math that you will look at for an Amazon profit. Now, the higher the value of the company, the more the multiplier factor. Because if you think about it, if it's a smaller company, it's not as lucrative to a lot of bigger financial institutions to buy you out. But let's just say you go into $15-20 million profit level. At that point, the multipliers increase quite a lot because you've got bigger institutions and bigger banks that are willing to buy you out. But for the sake of this presentation, most Amazon's businesses that we are looking at purchasing are around $1 million to $5 million range, because that allows us to buy a running business, upgrade, set things up, and then move and then sell it back off in a matter of 2 to 3 years, right? So your SD is around $1 million. If your SD is about $1 million, you're looking at valuation about between $3 and $5 million. Is usually around the 3x arena. And so that's kind of what you're looking at from this perspective. So let's talk about top 10 things to really focus on before you try to sell the company, right? This is really, again, really important. I know there says 6 factors up there, but I added 10 because I thought about a few more key factors to talk about. So healthy margins, guys, this is key. If your margins are not healthy and you don't have profit and you don't have SD at the bottom of it, it's not going to sell a lot, especially in Amazon business. It's not going to devalue the company. So if you are looking at selling a company, make sure that your pricing is in play, your supplier, costs are lowered, somehow generate a good, healthy margin for your products. If there are certain items that are not healthy in terms of margins, maybe you increase the pricing, maybe you shut those items down, but healthy margins are super important. Supplier contracts and transition is key, because anybody that's going to buy your business is going to ask the first question, which is, how do I get more products? And how efficient is your supply chain, right? Do you have a lot of problems with your suppliers? Do you have contracts in place? Can I transition? Will I get good inventory levels? Will I get good quick delivery? So on and so forth. So the supplier setup is extremely important. So streamline that process. And you should have that streamlined even when you're running a business, but it's especially important when you're exiting it, right? Amazon account health, super, super important. You know, make sure that keep a really close eye on your health. You want to make sure that you don't have any performance notifications. You want to understand that there are no quality. Again, Amazon health, account health is important in any given time. But if, like, one of the companies we were buying, we knew that there were 2 packaging issues that came about. And we dinged the company value because we said, look, there are 2 packaging issues. Amazon's asked you for a POA for one of the ASINs. We're not going to give you full value of this particular ASIN, because what if this ASIN gets shut down in the future? So those are important things to keep in mind, that, you know, make sure your quality of your ASINs are good, the quality of your accounts good, that your support tickets are being cleared out properly. So that's super important. The other thing, if you can do, is do competitor research, but also do niche, you know, be in a niche, you know, area. So what I mean by that is, like, if you're trying to sell a company, you want to be a leader, or at least one of the top dogs in a particular niche. So try to go after a product line that's not absolutely massive, because what it allows you to do is it allows you to what that allows you to do is it actually allows you to tell your buyer that, look, we rule this particular arena, and that you're not worried about a lot of competitors coming in and really hurt you. And so from our perspective, that is really important. We'll usually buy companies, and most people that are, you know, small to medium sized companies will buy when there is not a lot of competitor threat that's out there. So that's extremely important. So look into that. Brand. I know it's number 5, but it should be number 1. Brand is extremely important. If you don't have a brand, you're not selling any intellectual property. You're just selling your account. And, you know, without a particular brand or having a good intellectual property, it'll just be difficult for anybody to want to give good value for your company. So build a brand, build a strong brand. That's important, right? Product range and diversification. We touched on this a little bit earlier. Please diversify your products. If you have 1 or 2 products, the risk of purchase is really high, because if one of those products goes out, you've got a big problem. One of the companies that we're actually looking at right now has about 25 products, okay? And one of the products that they're selling, one of the ASINs they're selling, the raw material cost went through the roof. And because the raw material costs went through the roof, and this is because of the supply that's coming in from, you know, from other parts of the world, that particular item went from a good 30% margin to almost 4 to 5% margin, right? So, and it's a good selling product, and it sells 10% of the value of the business. So now the question that we have to the seller is that, look, you go back and you try your best to see what you can do. But if you can't do really well with this product or increasing the margin, then we'll have to reevaluate the company valuation just a little bit, so that way we can accommodate for a future margin drop. Now, imagine that being the only product, right? That would have been a massive, massive blow to the value, to a point where we may not even do that particular deal. But because that item was 10% of the sales, we're still okay, because worst case scenario, it'll take a little bit of hit and we'll move on. So if you don't have product range diversification, that's going to be a challenge. So please diversify your products as best as you can. Again, a lot of these things you can't really do 3 months before you want to sell the company. You have to do this a few years or at least 1 or 2 years prior, so that way you can set up for a successful exit towards the end, right? One of the other things we talked about is, again, accounting and management expenses. So clean up your accounting so you can clearly identify SE values. So in many instances, we've seen that when the company is trying to, it's clear to us when we understand that a seller is trying to clean up their accounting a month or 2 before they're trying to sell. Because you don't have any clarity over time. So you'll see like 12 different chart of accounts, and then you'll see no money, no money, no money, no money, like filed for them. And then all of a sudden, in 3 months ago, we'll see, oh, there's a $5,000 expense, $4,000 expense. So we go back and say, well, what happened to the expenses of this sort in the past? And they go, oh, we weren't maintaining any kind of financial structure. So it's very hard for us to go back 2 years and try to file everything properly. Again, this is a challenge, right? That scares us because, from a buyer's perspective, it's like, hey, you don't have clean accounting, which means how did you even come up with your P&L numbers, right? So keep your accounting and your management super, super clean throughout the whole time. It may even be good for you to invest in some type of a bookkeeper, and QuickBooks connects to your bank accounts just fine, and the transactions come in. So, you can file your transactions in a clean manner and keep up with that. The other thing is what I would recommend, and what we've done in the past, is we've always researched product lines that we haven't executed on. What that basically means is when a buyer comes in, you can say, look, this is what we have right now. This is what you can look into building. We've done the research to be able to get into this product line, but we haven't gone into it yet because we haven't had the time, or our interest is somewhere else, or we were looking at an exit. So we didn't really execute on that. But there's opportunities. So if you do pre-research on product lines, you'll be able to show that to the buyer. So from a buyer's perspective, they're looking and they're going, man, not only am I able to get this, but I can also get research done for this. And when you look at research, you're not only just doing research as what you can sell. Just go out and find the suppliers and get the product listings, the product costs in place, and do a little bit more math, because that allows the buyer to realize that, wow, there is opportunity. Number 9, which is extremely important, is process-oriented versus owner-oriented. What that basically means is that, look, when you're wanting to sell a company and a buyer comes into play, the first thing the buyer's going to ask is, how many hours do you put in a week? And a lot of times we'll get the answer that, oh, we only put in 4 or 5 hours a week or 7 hours a week. Everybody wants to downplay how many hours they put in because they want to show how automated their system is, right? But once we start asking more and more questions, that who does your purchasing? How is your purchasing done? Who manages supplier? Who manages your listing? Who does your customer support? The answers are, oh, the buyer does it. Oh, I do it. Oh, I do it. And I do this and I do that. And we're going, hold on a second. How are you doing all this, but you're only putting 5 to 10 hours a week? It doesn't make any sense. So in a lot of instances, just because you say that you're only putting in 5 to 10 hours a week doesn't necessarily mean that the buyer is going to believe that that's the amount of time you're saying. However, if you have a process-oriented approach where, let's say you have a virtual assistant doing something, or you say, look, I have a third-party company that is listing optimization, or I have these consultants that can help me out with this. And so you've got different people in play for operational purposes, then it kind of makes sense to go, oh, wow, they do have support. And you don't have to have hired employees that work this. If you're a smaller company, a smaller brand, you just need to be able to have, some type of a process in place where someone else is helping you with the support, or there is, some sort of a process out there. That's important, right? So process-oriented versus owner-oriented, that is really, really important. One of the other things I would say is I would be very afraid to buy a company that is all done by the owner. The reason why is because once I pay the owner out, and the owner's gone, in my opinion. I mean, he may say that you'll work with a contract, but that's still a fear for me that the owner could just disappear after he's getting the payment. And so having other people involved gives, from my perspective, from a buyer's perspective, a idea that, okay, even if the owner's gone, we still have 4 to 5, people that can kind of help us out. Again, for example, we bought a company where there was a consultant that came with the supplier. So you don't have to go to the supplier, you go to the consultant. The consultant understood the business for the last 2 to 3 years. So, and the consultant was driven by commission when we purchased an order from the supplier. It made our lives a lot easier to say, all right, no problem. If you have a problem with supplier, we have this consultant in place. Not our employee, we didn't pay them. But we knew that if the buyer walks out and doesn't support us, we have somebody to go to who is commission based with the supplier. Again, just an example. The last thing is very important is when you are looking to sell a company, around 12 months, be in a selling mode, which means that you don't want to target new product lines. You don't want to try to increase your PPC expenses to start doing experiments. Because when you're selling a company, the TTM, which is a trailing 12 months, is really important in terms of valuation. Now, I'm not saying tank the business and cut out the expenses. I'm not saying that. Don't do that, because that would adversely affect the value of your company. What I'm saying is, like, don't do experiments where you say, all right, let me try this new campaign or this new keyword. And because if it doesn't work, you've tagged that expense onto the company and it will impact your SDE at the bottom line. So you want to keep the company healthy. If there are research-based or if there are development-based tools or softwares or things like that that you've put in play, try to minimize that. So don't affect the growth of the company. Don't affect the operational standards of the company. Just be mindful that you're in the selling mode. So you want to make sure that you maximize that SDE as much as possible, because that's where the multiplier is going to come from. Okay. So these are the 10 things that that you want to look into. One thing that I definitely would like to bring to your attention is, if you're able to, and if you want to be able to give the buyer some financing options, that becomes really, really helpful. So for example, if you're open to seller financing, right, you can give buyers, this allows you to give buyers security by staying on board as a consultant, right? That gives a buyer peace of mind to say, hey, it's pretty chill, it's pretty cool that you're going to be there and you're going to help with the transition. So if there is some seller finance option opens, then as a buyer, they know that you have some skin in the game, that you will help support, right? The other things that you want to look at is, you will earn additional interest on finance options. So if you do a finance of, let's just say 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, you can say, look, I'm going to do a 7% or 6% or 7% interest. So you can earn some additional interest. And at the same time, you can even go back and say, look, fine, I'll do seller financing for you for, let's say 50% or 40% or 30% or whatever it is that you want to do. But you say that, look, I'll stay as a consultant, but there'll be a fee to give consultants, right? And as a buyer, if I want some comfort, I wouldn't mind paying that consultant fee or some type of a contract. Now, again, it will be all up to how the negotiations go, how the relationship is, right? But that is something that you can do. Another thing you can even do is, you can even request for an earnout in exchange for seller financing, right? Or a price reduction. So you could say, all right, fine, if you really want a price reduction of, let's just say X%, I'll do it only if you agree to give me an earnout over the next 6 months to a year. So if the company does fairly well and hits these benchmarks, then I'd like a percentage back, right? It's just a bargaining tool to say, I'll give you something, so you give me something, right? And a lot of times you'll be able to get an earnout, because the way the buyer is thinking, they're thinking that, hey, if I can do really well, because any buyer that comes into this business, they're going to think that they're going to redo the business model and they're going to add more value and they're going to increase. So you say, fine, look, if you're going to add value, then give me some as an earnout back, right? And so in this instance, the buyer will be thinking, yeah, look, if I do really well with it and I can upgrade it by, half, 1.5x or 2x, if I grow it, I don't mind giving, the seller some of that gains back. Now, there's a possibility that somebody could come in and say, look, hey, it's my working, it's my doing, I'm not going to give the seller back anything. Again, that's a possibility, but it's all about the relationship. So it is an exercise that you can do. The other thing that I would highly recommend, if you can, I know this applies to if you're a USA seller, if you can pre-qualify your company for SBA, which is small business, if you can get it pre-qualified, your buyer pool will massively increase. And I say that because for us, if there is an SBA pre-qualification, our team would be extremely, extremely excited to jump on. And we may even give you a little bit more higher I think one of the bids that we did a few months ago, the bid was for, I think around 2.4 million is what the buyer wanted. We actually made an offer of 2.5 because it was SBA finance. Because SBA financing means that I can buy that company with a 20% down, which means that cash on cash returns for me will be really good, right? So I can get my money back out very quickly, and then I'll just let it ride on the SBA financial terms. So SBA is very lucrative. So if you can get pre-qualified for SBA, please do so. Look into what SBA qualification means, or if you can get external banks to kind of qualify you, right? So you can go back and establish a relationship and say, look, I'm going to sell my company in the next 2 to 3 years. Would you be willing to pre-qualify my sale? If the bank goes, yeah, I'll pre-qualify your company because I know it's a solid company, it's a good company, it's doing good, obviously they're going to have to vet the buyer out to make sure the buyer is strong enough. But if you can put some external, financial, in play, that makes it really, really lucrative, right? Some other factors, that impact the value range of your business is growth opportunities inside Amazon. So if, let's say, you're buying a US company or a UK company, but it has the ability to build on the other side, talk about that. Growth opportunities outside Amazon. If you don't have an e-commerce store and you can drive e-commerce value, that's great. If there's barriers to entry in your particular product, one of the products we did was it's a furniture piece. I don't want to give up too much information for NDA, but it was a furniture piece, but they had styled the furniture piece in such a way that it was really, really cool. But you couldn't go out and buy that particular styled piece because it was only available through one of the suppliers, and they had spent a lot of time on that supplier to be able to create the mold and stuff like that. That causes barriers to entry. And when that happens, you're the only one selling that particular product, and it's hard to get in the market. The value of the business then goes up. Account ratings and reviews, that adds value too. So if you have a lot of account ratings and reviews, that's important. Owner's workload, like we talk about, if you can do that, that's easy. Transferability. Sometimes when we're discussing this, we say, hey, how do we transfer? It's like, oh, well, I have this corporation, but this corporation owns this corporation. But I have my accounts under this corporation, but I have my logins, my seller. So it's just like so complicated. It's like, dude, why don't you clean this out? There should be one set of LLCs, and then you've got everything tagged into it. A lot of times we'll also notice that people use their personal email addresses in key accounts, and then go, are you going to give me your personal email address along with it that says nedhakam@gmail.com? Well, no. So the thing is that, okay, so if you're trying to set things up, use emails that are business emails. So when you sell the company, you sell the domain, you sell the email address, so the whole thing becomes a package, and it's an easy push off, right? Transferability, make it easy. Number of staff or contractors needed. This also makes things easy. So if it's specialized business and you've got some staff that are specialized trained, it could be looked in a good way or a bad way, but it does add value when you have people that know what they're doing as part of it. Brand ownership and trademarks we talked about, super important. Make sure your trademarks are filed, they're active. Economic conditions do matter as well. So when things like a pandemic happens, or there are e-commerce uptrends and downtrends, it really helps. So if your economic condition has caused an adverse effect on your business, you may not want to just sell that easy, because you want to wait for things to shift. You're able to build back up so you can get maximum value. We right now have been making quite a few deals on companies that are not doing so well, but we're not paying the full price for it. We buy it at small amounts, because we know when pandemic's gone and things go back to the norm, it's going to shoot back up, and we'll take that equity value any day, right? So keep those things in mind. And obviously, keep marketplace value trends. Right now, marketplaces are trending really, really well. Most people are going towards e-commerce, so that really helps, right? I know that I have a few more minutes. Prem Kumar, you want to say if anything so far?
There are a bunch of questions there, but I think I will let you finish the rest of the slides as well to go into it.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I see the question. So I'll answer some of these questions. So
Oh, sure. Yeah.
let me just spend another 10 minutes, talk about during exit and post exit, and then we could take some questions. Hopefully that
Sure.
should be okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So again, I'm going through a lot of the stuff very quickly. This buying and selling a business is not very straightforward. It does require a lot of negotiations. There's a lot to do with this. And so the better homework and the more research you do, the better understanding you have, the better it is for you, right? So let's talk about during the exit. So during the exit, you want to, so let's talk about types of buyers and types of agents, okay? And there's a four phase of sale that I usually go by the four phases of these sales, right? Types of buyers, okay? You've got corporate people, these are high-paid employees or C-level executives that has a lot of cash, right? And they want to they want to buy, they want to separate, cash flow outside of their jobs, right? So they're looking to buy. So that's corporate person. You have an internet entrepreneur, which is like somebody experienced. Like I would consider myself an internet entrepreneur, right? Because I have an understanding. I've bought and sold before. I've got some understanding. I've got a portfolio. So it's the fact that when I make offers and when I'm in the market, it's easier, for me to kind of run. But again, that's an internet entrepreneur. And then you have the brick and mortar entrepreneur, which is businesses who still exist, but they're trying to diversify the portfolio into the digital space, right? Into the e-commerce world because they're in the brick and mortar world. So those are the three major categories out of people that we're looking at. I wouldn't say one is worse than the other. I would just say that if you have the opportunity to sell to somebody that has experience, it'll make your life a lot easier when it comes to selling the company. But at the same time, if they have experience and they're experienced negotiators, there's a possibility that you may not get the full value that you would get with a corporate person or somebody that does not understand the e-commerce world. So again, there are pros and cons about in both instances. So I'm not guiding you one way or the other, which is better or which is worse. I'm just saying those are the three different types of buckets that you can look into. In terms of agents, it's very important to have the right agent. Sometimes we've noticed that we've got agents that are extremely hands-off, and sometimes we know the agents are very hands-on. And usually the agents that really care for you and really care for your company and like your background story and want to see your success will do a good job for you. Versus some agents may just be, hey, I'm just going to list it, grab a bunch of buyers, create this meet and greet, and you guys run with it, right? Again, it's a different styles. If you want your agent to be hands off and you want to control the whole thing for the most part, then so be it. Let the agent just make a connection and shoot out emails for you. So you have three different types of agents. You've got the small business marketplace, right? Micro businesses, these are making $100,000 in sales per year. So these are things where you just post online. You don't really necessarily have a private agent. It's just a marketplace you push out. The marketplace will shoot out a lot of emails and then you'll get some bites, right? Then you go through a broker, which is a medium-sized business. So if your company is smaller in value, the broker won't necessarily will be interested because the commission that they're going to make is going to be very small if it's a small company. But if you're looking at $100,000 to $20 million, in revenue per year, then you can actually go with a particular broker, right? And the broker will kind of go through the entire process with you. They'll explain to you. They'll even create a deck for you. Some of the brokers are really good. Again, I work with a lot of brokers, so I don't want to name out any companies particularly. I like all of them. Some I like to work with are easier than others. But that's a conversation for a different day. I would recommend that you interview multiple agents, talk to multiple different places, and see who you like to work with, and then let them bring on board. So idealistically, when we're selling a company, we want the broker to be able to help with our deck, to be able to shoot out the deck to a lot of all of their potential buyers, right? Set up the meetings for us. And then and then the other thing that we would like for the agents to do is to screen our buyers before you put them on the table for us. So if the broker doesn't understand the buyer, then they need to understand the buyer first. They need to meet with them. They need to make sure that they have the ability of purchase, and then they bring it to us so we're not wasting our time. That's ideal. And then and so that's the broker. source. Okay, you're looking at 66 days. Honestly, now, if you're looking at in this day and age, I've seen from the time the company's posted, if it's a good company with a brand, some financing options, SBA evaluation, from the time and right around the $500,000 to $3-4 million mark, from the time it's posted, from the time an LOI is executed, it's, I would say, about 10 days or less. It's absolutely absurd, because there are so many people that are looking to buy, and so it's really fast. Now I'm talking about it. How long does it take to sell your business? Now I'm talking about getting it into an LOI phase, about 8 to 10 days, right? But then from there, you've got due diligence, which is about 30-35 days, and then you're looking at finance options. So I would say around the 40 to 60 day mark for smaller companies, right? If you're looking at SBA or financing options, then you tack on another at least 60 days, 60. And if you're doing SBA, you mentally be prepared to go into the 3-month range, because the financial documents that are required from financial institutions is a lot, right? So again, so that's where the ballpark is. If you're looking at anywhere between 100 to 500,000, you're looking at, and if it's only a cash deal at this point, 10 days for the LOI process, 30 days for the due diligence, and then you can tag on another 30-45 days for discussions, and then you execute. Honestly, I also feel that the seller can drive that time frame down as best as possible. And if the buyer is not motivated, and is not fast enough, then you have to push a little bit, and that's what we'll talk about right next slides. Let's go into the negotiation part, right? Negotiation is, you want to establish a target price based on your SDE. You have to understand that. Know your inventory value. Please understand your inventory value. That plays a big factor. If you're looking at $1 million sales, but you've got like $800,000 in inventory, that's going to be a big challenge to sell, because you're almost like, so understand your inventory value, okay? You want to be lean in your inventory value when you're trying to sell. I'm not saying low, I'm saying lean, which means that depending on your cycle count, you don't want to have too much excess inventory, because that's extra cash coming out of the buyer's pocket, which then reduces the return on investment. Again, use the top 10 tricks that we talked about. Use the financing options as part of the negotiations that we talked about. Be hands-on with negotiations and consult with an agent. So you should be involved with it. Now, if you feel like I really don't want to be involved, my agents are awesome, and then run with it, so be it. I recommend that you should be hands-on with it, so that way you can also pick the buyers and understand what's going on for better valuation. Again, it's your business, it's your baby. The agent may be selling 15 other businesses and may not give your business enough time, but if you're hands-on with it, you will do the best you can to sell your child, right? Your baby. That's important, right? If you want, you can set up a full and final offer. This comes in play when you have multiple offers, right? So if you have, let's say, 6, 7, 8 offers or 10 plus offers, you could say, look, I got all these offers. Now you go back to everybody and say, listen, there's going to be a full and final round. So we've got 10 plus offers. Send me the best offer you can, right? And usually you'll get a little bit of an uptake in some of the evaluations that you can get. It's just a thought. You don't have to do it, but it's something that you could do. As a buyer, we don't really like this whole full and final round. At least our group does not. But from a seller's perspective, it really does add value. And anytime there's full and final, if you really are interested in the project, we will add some increase of value, just to get a little bit better offer out there, right? And then if offer does not match your needs, move on to the next prospect. Don't try to force sale anything. In my opinion, if you don't have to force sale it and you have the time, don't force sale it. It'll come back to you. You will be able to give it a little bit of time, think about it better, understand with your experience, and go right back at it. Okay. LOI phase is the first phase, that we talk about. I know it's at 48 minutes already, so I'll try to go as quick as I can through this. So LOI phase is important. So, you want to add all the negotiations to the LOI at a high level, right? It's normally a 2-3 page document. It's not the details, so it's just an LOI, right? Understand the finance and cash intentions up front. Okay, if you can add that to the LOI, even better. Don't sign an LOI until you've actually researched a buyer. Look for some experience at least, right? So because once you sign an LOI, they're going to try to put you into like a 30-day, 15-day, whatever the time frame is for due diligence, right? Sign an NDA. Make sure you sign an NDA to avoid fake buyers looking for free information, right? That's important. You'll have 20 offers, but 10 offers are just asking for information just for the sake of it. So if there are, you never know what's going to happen with it, if it's a good buyer or not. And so sign an NDA that avoids, a lot of issues in the future. When you're signing an LOI, in terms of days, you want to keep it less than 30 days. And if you want, you can add a provision to say, look, if your due diligence is going well, you can extend it out for another 30 days or whatever. So what you don't want is you want to sign an LOI for one of the buyers, and a week has gone by and they haven't done anything. They haven't requested due diligence documents. They haven't requested anything. And now you're just taking that off the market for the due diligence period for that particular buyer and nothing, right? So if you put that in play, and if somebody comes and says, no, man, I need 60 days for due diligence, you say, all right, that's fine. I'll give you 20 days up front and then extendable by 20 and 20, right? Something of that nature that allows you to pull out. Now, usually you can pull out of an LOI for the most part. But it's just important to push the buyer's interest as much as you can ahead of time. Prevent your buyer from discounting the value of your business right off the bat on the LOI, because that's only going to affect you later. And use legal advisors in negotiations as best as possible, because all of it should be written. It should all be legal. So that's the LOI phase that you have. Due diligence. Again, it's super important to for there to be a proper due diligence, right? Ask the buyers to request a document list and say, look, what is it that you want? You don't need to volunteer a lot of information. You make sure that there's a request in place, but you should have your documents ready so your due diligence process is quick. The other thing is that when sellers, when a buyer asks, like when we ask a seller for due diligence information and they take 4 or 5 days to get back to us, it kind of like puts us back and say, hey, are you not prepared for this? Are you putting this together now? Do you not know this information already? Again, makes, the nervous factor kick in. So, have your documents ready. Be clear and transparent. Do not hide things, because eventually that will be found, and you don't want things to be found later on after the contracts have been signed and things like that. It's better for you to be clear up front so that there are no issues later on, right? If you can provide access to a third-party software as opposed to Seller Central, if and when that's possible. What we usually do is, since obviously we have Seller Mobile, which is what we use for our own internal analytics, we tell the sellers that, hey, please integrate onto Seller Mobile, so that way then we can see all the reports and the back. And we have a really cool mobile phone on Seller Mobile. So anytime like I want to look up, how it's doing through the due diligence phase, how the charts are growing, how the inventory values are, what's going on with shipments, I can just do it on my mobile phone. So I always tell them to go to Seller Mobile. Obviously, we are biased to it. We built it and own it. But you can have it to go to any other software you want. But then again, it's a third party that's software that you can use, that you can keep track of. Set clear time frames, like set time frame expectations, really, really important. And again, assist legal advisors in negotiating your drafts. Okay. Due diligence checklist includes Amazon statements, bank statements, merchant statements, vendor invoices to prove the cost of goods. If you can, and if you try to protect your suppliers and not disclose them, the last thing you want is, for the deal not to go through and some of these guys to, disclose your supplier information and then just kind of buy directly from your supplier and list it on Amazon. So if you can mask your supplier details, that would be ideal. In some instances, you may not be able to do that. In some instances, finding the supplier would be really, really simple, and it wouldn't really matter. So, if you can mask it because your supplier is important, then please do that if you can. But the cost of goods sold should be easily proven, along with bank statements and merchant statements. The closing phase, again, use a lawyer to go over asset or stock purchase agreements. You know, use an escrow company when it comes to closing. It just avoids complications. Keep your transactions as simple as you can. Don't create too many complications because it's really hard to keep track of later. Set up a clean cutoff date for closing as best as you can, like at the start of the month or the end of the month. So proration and calculations and expenses and revenue determination becomes a lot simpler. And one thing that I will just tell you, and this may not be the case for you, but lawyers do tend to complicate transactions all the time. Like my lawyer will send a stock purchase agreement that's completely cited towards me. And when I'm looking at this, I was like, yeah, bro, this is great for me, but how am I going to ask a buyer or a seller to kind of sign off on this, right? And you don't want to sour the relationship. So try to be as you know, in the middle ground as possible. Obviously keep your interest in mind, but take what the lawyers are saying with a little bit of a grain of salt, because they're known to just tack on 100 things onto that. So again, this is my experience, you know, and yours may be different, but make sure that, you know, you're using your relationship knowledge that you've established with the buyer or seller, with the buyer to, you know, to kind of keep things moving along. That's some of the advice that I have from a closing phase. And the last thing I want to do is asset transfer. Again, you know, you could ask me for the presentation later and I can drop you all of these things that you need to do. There's seller accounts, the website, domains, emails, register on trademarks, customer lists, marketing material, vendor contacts. All these things should be ready for you, right? Your phone numbers, any agreements, inventory on hand, have all this stuff ready. A lot of these lists you can even find on the internet, but you know, keep this stuff ready as best you can. Things to remember: buyer will take on the assets of businesses, but will not assume existing liabilities, right? In most instances, they're not going to look at liabilities, and your agreements are going to say that the liabilities won't exist. So, you know, be smart about that. Suppliers need to be notified of the change of ownership, so make sure that you make the proper introductions in place. This is after everything is worked. This is you know, in the post phase, and work with the accountants to file proper taxes and close the books properly. You don't want this to come back to haunt you 2 or 3 years later, you know, when the tax. So, and then once all that is done, the next course that you want to look at, if you have $1 million or $500,000 or $2 million sitting in your account, you want to start thinking of wealth management, which is a completely different thought process. We use UBS for our wealth management. We have a lot of
Trying to join back. I would like to just let you know that you can go to oh wait, hang on, I think it's back. Yeah, you can go to slido.com and enter 76760 to get your questions on. Hey Ned, I think we lost you for 1 minute.
Sorry about that.
Sure. That's all right. Yeah.
Cool.
I think
So,
was that the end of your presentation? I think.
perfect. Any questions that you guys have?
So I have shared my screen here. Let's start from the first one that we have. So this, I think, is a question about people having multiple brands, and can they sell individual brands, or should they sell the whole brands, whole business setup?
So usually what we'll try to do is we'll try to buy different brands and then lump them together in one sale. So having multiple brands in an account is not bad as long as you're selling all the brands at the same time. And so if you're selling more than one brand, the valuation is better because you've got, you know, multiple brands being sold. But if you're not wanting to sell multiple brands at the same time, then maybe you want to think about how you can separate the accounts so that one brand is sold and the other brand is not.
Mm-hmm. So I hear that as we need to keep the account separate as well.
Yes, I mean, so the accounts are separate okay, so that basically happens is, let's just say that you have one ASIN and you're trying to sell it from two different seller accounts. That is not allowed by Amazon, because what ends up happening is you can end up taking more buy box percentages, and it becomes a disadvantage for other sellers, right?
Mhm.
But if, let's just say, I have a premium brand and I have a non-premium brand, right? And so if as long as they're different ASINs, right, it's okay to use the same account, but they have to be different ASINs. You cannot sell using two accounts that you own on the same ASIN. That's not possible. So when we did our party supply company, we had multiple brands in there. We had a different brand for paint, versus we had a different brand for some of the stuffed toys. We had a different brand for like light up stuff. So we had different brands, and each line was a different brand, and that's okay as long as you have different ASINs. But you got to sell them all together if you want to keep them in the same account.
I see. Okay, cool. So I got a question from Christopher. Christopher is currently in the process of preparing his business for sale and looking to sell to a specific company. Is it possible to do this? Any tips on this?
If you're selling to a specific company, like you've targeted like a competitor or something of that nature that you're selling to, I think that's what that's about.
Yeah, I can explain if that makes it easier.
Yeah.
So it's an accessory for a robotic kind of gadget that was the parent company was originally funded, sort of had huge VC investment, raised hundreds of millions, and they kind of went off track and they got into software and it went wrong. So they sold their intellectual property to a new company at the start of the year. And because I've sold well with sold the product well itself, and I've got kind of intellectual property associated, the popular YouTube video influencers are on board, so forth. I'm thinking like by itself is quite a strong proposition because the sales history and the markup it has, but it would be more value to this company that's acquired this intellectual property because it gives them a warm customer base, really. So that's yeah.
No, that makes sense. I mean, those are synergic values. Usually when you're looking at a synergic value of some sort, the synergy value goes to the buyer. But that doesn't necessarily mean that, you can't add extra value, because let's just say if you're the only one that have something that they will really need, like it fits the puzzle really well, then you can definitely, work things out. Also, you could work on a agreement to kind of stay on board and add additional value to it, or become part of that team if you can. So there's a lot of ways to strike that if you want to think about it.
Thank you. Yeah, it's useful.
Nice. And the next one is seasonality a factor too in determining the value?
It kind of is, but usually when you're looking at seasonality, when you're looking at valuation, you're looking at the TTM, which is the trailing 12 months, right? So if you're looking at 12 months, seasonality is already included into your valuation proposition. So I'll give you an example. We bought one company that sells calendars and sells paper diaries. It's basically the calendar that you write in, right? Like planners. That was the word I was looking for. And so when we valued the company, we didn't value it any less, only because we knew that the sales were coming around the November to Feb timing. But when we were doing the valuation, we were using the trailing 12 months as valuation. So we knew that from April through August, it's not going to sell a lot, right? But we know that at the end of the year, it's going to pick up on the sales and we'll make up for it. So that's why the value did not drop. However, what we did was when we looked at that particular product, we said, look, we can buy this seasonal brand, introduce product lines that would sell throughout the year as well. So it actually, for us, it was an enhanced value, but it should not impact valuation because you're looking at trailing 12 months.
Nice. Nice. So it's mainly that your brand value is what a seller will be, what a buyer would be looking for. It's not just the product that you currently have.
Absolutely. The brand value is key.
Good. Nice. So you yourself as a buyer, what kind of profit margins do you see as healthy in a business?
Man, that's a tough question because profit margins are different for different categories. We've bought companies that have, profit margins around 11, 12% range, all the way up to 25%, 30% range. Now, 25, 30% profit margins are relatively more difficult to come around. Usually we see in this particular arena around the 15, 20% range. So those percentages are good, but again, if you're selling a company at 10, 11 or less than that in margins, the impact is going to be on the valuation, because you're looking at your SDE, right, which is your seller's discretionary earnings, which is basically, whatever you take at the end of the year, and then you multiply 3. So if your margins are low, then you get a lower SDE, so the evaluation is lower. However, we stumbled upon one company that did 70 million in sales, but they were only taking home like $600,000 because they were reselling some major brands. So they had extremely high sales because they had supplier vendor level pricing. So they were able to, but the margins were the profits was 600,000. So at that time we valued that company based on the SDE, even though the margins were low and the revenues were through the roof. Right now, having said that, if your margins are low, again, it makes it more risky, because if that $70 million in revenue drops to like $50 million, the first thing that will be wiped out is your margins, because there's always fixed costs. So if your fixed costs are very high and your revenue drops, then the fixed costs will kill your margins even more. Does that kind of make sense? So yeah, having good margins does really help. But valuation will change based on that.
Nice. Thank you. Another one from Christopher. Can you recommend any services or agents that support acquisition negotiation between parties? For US-based Amazon company?
Yeah, if you send me that email, separately, maybe we can have a discussion. You can shoot me an email. You can look me up, ned@sellermobile.com, and send me an email. I can give you some names. I would hate to put it on video, because I have good relationships with a lot of agents and I work with a lot of them. So I definitely don't want to, say anything about anybody on the recorded chat.
Cheers.
Cool. And I think this is coming from a moderate seller, I believe. Any suggestions of marketplaces where we can list?
It's, again, if you could do things like Biz Buy Sell and some of the other listings marketplaces that you can put on. If you Google it, you'll get quite a few of them. And you can just list your Biz Buy Sell is just one of them. But there's quite a few, and the marketplaces that you're listing on will depend on like what type of businesses and so on. There are different marketplaces for different countries and different accounts. So if you Google it, you'll get a much better list, or send me an email and obviously I can discuss. And I see the next one, which is like, how much do the agents typically charge? I've seen agents charge, depending on the size of the business, I've seen agents charge anywhere between 3% to 15%, 15-20%. So it all depends on the size of the company. The last deal we did was about $1 million, and the agent 1.1 million, and the agent took about 10%.
Oh wow! Okay, actually that's a lot, isn't it?
That's a lot. But then as the numbers go up, again, it's all negotiable, right? That's the key.
All right. Brilliant. I think that covers a couple of questions there. That's here. I think it's a very subjective question. How long do you think it takes for a typical private label brand to become saleable?
It's very, you're right, it's very subjectable. I mean, you have to have quite a few things behind it, but I mean, if I were preparing for a sale, I would start preparing 12 to 15 months ahead of time, so that way I could get the max value for, you know, for the brand. Again, that's my perspective. That's what we do when we want to sell a company.
All right, cool. Like this one, what happens to the business assets, the products in the warehouse in an acquisition? How do you transfer the products? Or?
That's a good question. So, you know, if we will usually transfer the products if the seller has it in his possession. But eventually, if it's like not a lot of inventory, we will use a 3PL for it. Some of the companies that we've sold, you know, we had almost about a 50,000 square feet warehouse. So, you know, 3PLs would not take on a business of that nature, but the buyer that was picking us up had a warehouse and had capacity. And so we put them in containers and shipped it to the buyer's warehouse. So yeah, it would all depend. But if you have some inventory in your warehouse, the buyer could easily go with a 3PL and have you ship it all out to a 3PL and use that, or ship it to their warehouse. It all depends on the resources available.
All right, cool. So are you sure the business owner salaries are not considered an expense in EBITDA? Does it change based on the buyer? I think it's a valuation question, right?
Yeah. So the salaries of a particular business owner, right? So again, it all comes down to how much the business owner is working. So for example, the business owner is the only one that's running the operations. If I as a buyer, I'm talking about me, like if I as a buyer picks up the business and I don't want to run a day-to-day operations because I have another job or I've got other companies to run, then I will not consider the buyer's salary as an SDE, because I'm going to have to replace the buyer with an employee, the owner with an employee, owner salary with an employee. Now, if the owner is drawing a $200,000 or $250,000 salary, then that could be argued back and say, look, you can get the work done for about $30,000 to $50,000. So, you know, $150,000 and $200,000 of that salary goes into, you know, your SDE. Whereas the other amounts, you know, you will need to hire an employee for. But if the owner is just picking up a $250,000 salary and there are other employees that are running the business and he's just picking up the salary for the sake of it, then the entire thing can go into the SDE part. So it's not necessarily like a one answer fits all. It's there's quite a few questions that need to be asked around that.
All right, cool. I think that sums it up. It's such a wonderful presentation, Ned. It's a privilege to have had you here, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. I think everyone who joined enjoyed as well. We had the best RSVP and the worst turnout, so I have to apologize personally for that. I have to figure out why. All right. But apart from that, anybody that wants to get in touch with Ned, please get in touch with him at ned@sellermobile.com or write an email to me, premkumar@AmazinSellers.com. I can connect you with Ned as well. Many thanks for your time, Ned, unless if there is anything else that you want to share.
Nope, that's good. Thank you for having me on, and hope this information will be helpful to a lot of people out there.
Yeah, it's very useful, and it's going to be on our personal YouTube channels as well. Going to the community, and I'll share the link with you. Please share with your community as well, Ned. Yeah, thank you.
Will do. Perfect. Thank you, sir. All right.
Thank you. See you later. Bye bye.
See ya. Bye.